Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Irka Kainak, and welcome to the Life Unites Us June webinar, The Importance of Family Recovery. I'm going to start today by covering a few Zoom housekeeping items and then moving on to an overview of the Life Unites Us campaign. And then we're going to hear from Bobbie McBurney-Johnson and her presentation on the importance of family recovery, followed by Stacey Karchner and her work with Be a Loving Mentor, or BALM. And after we've heard from our speakers, we will have time for questions and then wrap up for the day. And I see, if you want to drop in the chat where you're coming from today, we'd love to hear who's here. So please feel free to do that. Now, I just want to remind everybody that if you do have questions, please enter them into the Q&A once we get to that portion, and not the chat. So, we can use the chat now for a little bit just to let everyone know where you're coming from. But when we do questions later, it's much easier for us if you put it into the Q&A. If you do happen to get disconnected from Zoom, please just retry the original link. But if for some reason you're not able to get back in, the meeting will be recorded and sent out later this week. Okay, so moving on to learning a little bit more about the Life Unites Us campaign. Life Unites Us is a project developed to reduce stigma around opioid use disorder, and this is done by using a people-forward approach that aims to connect individuals through stories. So through research and practice in anti-stigma work, we have found that connecting people through their stories and similarities can and will reduce stigma. So in order to do this, the team records stories of community members across Pennsylvania, stories of both personal recovery and as an ally to someone in recovery. And then short stories are produced and featured on the Life Unites Us website and social media. And the intent is that by sharing stories of hope and resiliency, we can prove that recovery is probable, that reducing stigma makes recovery more likely, that addiction is treatable, that those living with an addiction are just like everyone else, and that those living with OUD are so much more than their disease. So as I mentioned on the in the last slide, the campaign can be found online, and the website features a library of resources that are shared across social media platforms. And of course, as many of you know, the great news is that you can join us in ending stigma by following and sharing the campaign. So if you're part of a larger organization or effort, we'd love to invite you to become a partner with Life Unites Us. So if you're interested, please email Maddie Morales, and we'll make sure to drop her email in the chat box for easy access, and we'll do that a little bit later. So now that we've heard about the campaign, let's move on to the speaker and presentation section of the webinar. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Bobbie McBurney-Johnson. Bobbie currently serves as the Director of Mission Advancement and Public Relations for the Clearfield County Area Agency on Aging, and is the founder and CEO of Resources to Empower, Support, and Transform Kinship Families, so otherwise known as REST. So REST is a nonprofit charitable organization dedicated to serving informal kinship families in her region. Bobbie is dedicated to removing stigma associated with substance use disorder by promoting the possibility of recovery for both those struggling with SUD and their family members, as her family has been impacted by the disease of addiction. She serves on the Pennsylvania Parent Advisory Council, volunteers as a board member for the Clearfield Jefferson Drug and Alcohol Commission, and facilitates a weekly Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, or PAL, family recovery support group. Bobbie, take it away.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. So thankful for this opportunity. And it looks like, is everything on the screen okay? Got a thumbs up, Stacy, does that look good?
Perfect.
No. Oh, okay. Good heavens. Well, what a way to get started. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry about that. What would we do in Zoom world if we didn't have those technical difficulties? I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to function. So good to have everybody here. Again, such an honor to be presenting today on a topic that I'm very passionate about, and to be able to partner with the Life Unites Us campaign, which I just think is phenomenal and have loved being a part of. And again, this is just another step in decreasing the stigma that's associated with OUD and SUD that not just our loved ones face, but certainly us as well. So as mentioned earlier, our family has been impacted by SUD, and for purposes of this presentation, I am going to use the terminology substance use disorder or SUD to just cover the wide range of substances that people fall in addiction to or suffer from. So each person in our family has been on their own recovery path. Our daughter has struggled with SUD, and I'm proud to say today that she is a year and a half in recovery and is doing well. And all of us as family members who love her and support her have been on a path as well. So we're going to share a little bit about that later. But it is a journey that you can navigate, and you can do that one day at a time. All right, so here are the objectives we're going to look at today. We want to understand the impact that substance use disorder has on the family, and really why it's called a family disease. And then, of course, explore the meaning of what family recovery is, kind of peel back the pieces of the onion and kind of explore that as far as the definition goes. Also looking at the pivotal role that family recovery can play in the life of a loved one who has substance use disorder, and how do we as family members get there, and describe the types of supports that are needed by family members. So Dean Dauphinais, who is a prominent recovery and mental health advocate, he works really hard to combat stigma associated with addiction and depression. You may be familiar with him as an author. He said this, he said, recovery is an ongoing process for the addict and his or her family. In recovery, there is hope, and hope is a wonderful thing. And I would be amiss if I did not begin and end today's presentation with this concept of hope, because hope really is a wonderful thing. For the family who's impacted by a loved one's substance use disorder, and for the loved one, him or herself, hope really is a game changer. It's vital, and sometimes, unfortunately, it can be elusive. We may feel like we just don't have any hope, or maybe we can't have hope. But for today, hope is our goal in our discussion. And I want to just reiterate that today in the United States, over 23 million people are living in recovery. And so what does that mean? That gives me goosebumps every time I say that, because that means people have overcome this. People are living in recovery from substance use disorder, and also those family members who have come alongside them. They are moving on with their lives too, hopefully. And we know that unfortunately, sometimes there are people who don't win that battle, and their families carry on in their name. And I know there are many on this call today who are doing that. And to those of you, I commend you for all the work that you do, and certainly, extend our sympathies for your loss. But this is such an important message for us to get out for folks, that there is a lot of reason to hope for a better outcome. So let's dive a little bit more into the impact that SUD has on the family. This is where I want to kind of really stop and peel back, like I said, pieces of the onion, and look at some of these definitions. So let's just kind of go back and look at, what is the impact that SUD has on someone diagnosed with the disease? If you're working in the field, or if you are a loved one of someone struggling with substance use disorder, it doesn't take a lot for you to see what is happening to these people. And especially as family members, you don't have to have a particular degree or background to witness the declining health that they have, both physically and mentally. Also seeing that there's a decreased quality of life, loss of productivity, or even unemployment. Sometimes, unfortunately, there's homelessness or involvement with the criminal justice system. We know that with addiction, there's an increased potential for loss of life, and also increased violence. And those are just very basic generalities. The reason why I have the first three highlighted is because really, when it comes to family members, we too can experience these types of impacts. We as family members can end up having impaired physical or mental health, that decreased quality of life, loss of productivity, difficulty at work, and keeping up productivity. And the reason for that is because that's where that whole idea of a family disease comes in. It impacts us as family members, those who love the person who is struggling with substance use disorder. David Sheff, you may be familiar with him. He is the author of The Beautiful Boy. And if you haven't seen that or read the book, I highly recommend you do that. But he puts it so well when he is talking about his son, Nick. He said, anyone who has lived through it, or those who are now living through it, knows that caring about an addict is as complex and fraught and debilitating as addiction itself. And there's so much truth in those words because of the similarities of what the family goes through. So when we talk about family, what do we actually mean? And that might seem like a no-brainer, but I think it's important for us to kind of look at family structure and recognize the fact that the family structure is changing, that in the United States and across the world today, when you talk about family, you're not just talking about a traditional nuclear family structure, that the whole idea of family structure is constantly evolving. It's not static. And so when you look at family structure, you could be talking about single parent homes, step parents. You could be talking about kinship or foster families, multi-generational homes. We see an increase in that. And the reason why that's relevant is because actually the impact that SUD has on a family can actually depend upon that dynamic of the family structure. And that's something that sometimes in terms of family therapy, people look at and consider in providing that type of programming. But when you look at the term itself, family, it really does imply an enduring involvement on an emotional level. And these are the connections that we have with loved ones that are the closest emotionally. So when we're talking about family throughout this presentation, I really am referring to family in this broader context and to be all inclusive. I think it's important for us to understand that. So looking at SUD as a family disease, as I mentioned earlier, when you look at the impact SUD has on our loved ones, we know that there can be similar impacts to the family members. So family members may actually have physical issues, mental health issues, trauma. There could be detachment issues, abuse and neglect. But when we go down through this and we kind of tear this apart, we look and we say, okay, well, physical issues, what does that mean? Well, for anybody who has walked this path as a family member, we know that we can become all consumed with our loved one, and we can be all consumed with worry and fear and sadness and a whole range of emotions. But what that can basically equate to physically is that we can stop taking care of ourselves, and there can be that lack of self-care. We know that there can be a lack of sleep. We know that we can fall into poor nutrition. Some people, when they get in that mode, can't eat. Some of us, unfortunately myself, I go the other direction, so where you tend to overeat. And then also mental health issues or trauma, things like anxiety, depression. When you're talking about children in particular, children of parents who are struggling with SUD, you could see abandonment issues and that sort of trauma. We also talk a lot about codependency, and what does that mean? And we know that codependency can be very complex. But generally, we know that it's when someone, typically a family member in this sense, loses their sense of independence, believes they must tend to somebody else and become all consumed with our family member. And they return the favor to us, right? We could probably spend an entire time together just talking about codependency and maybe some of these other particular issues or impacts. Also detachment. So oftentimes families can get to the point as they're on this journey with their loved one that perhaps they just feel like giving up and detaching and saying, look, you know, I just can't have anything else to do with my loved one. I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this. And they cut themselves off. Abuse and neglect, again, would be particularly relevant to spouses, partners, or children. That certainly could be an issue. You know, again, it's impacting different people within that family structure in a different way. And actually, too, I just want to share that when I'm talking about the impact on the family, too, not just looking at the family structure in a broader sense, but also looking at those adult members of the family. There are different nuances, of course, when it comes to children within a situation like this, and that's just not within the scope of what we're going to get into today, but certainly understanding that there is that impact as well. So what does family recovery mean? Well, again, let's kind of take it back to basics. Let's look at, what does recovery mean? You know, recovery can mean a bunch of different things theoretically for different people, because we know that there are many paths to recovery. And if you don't know that, you're going to hear me say that a couple more times today, because it's true not just for the people with substance use disorder, but also for us as families. But what is an actual definition of recovery? So when you look at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, they give the definition that's right there on the screen: a process of change through which people improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. Being in recovery is when these positive changes and values become part of a voluntarily lived or adopted lifestyle. That's the textbook definition. So that would be applicable really to someone who's struggling with substance use disorder as they move hopefully towards that recovery path, and also for us as family members. So at the core, the whole idea of recovery and what it is really means the same for all of us. Now, a couple things I would like to point out there. Notice in that definition, when we're talking about the applicability to families, it doesn't say anything about fixing somebody, right? So if anybody's going to get quote unquote fixed in this process, it's us individually, and we'll talk more about that. But as I said, it's really the essence of recovery is all about getting our life back and coming back to having a higher quality of life. To take that a step further, I did pull out some information that I thought was really good. SAMHSA actually has a really nice piece on recovery and what that means. And in that, it actually breaks out 4 dimensions of recovery. And again, this is talking about recovery in a general sense, not necessarily recovery for family, but there's definitely, it correlates to the walk that we're on. So when you look at the 4 major dimensions of recovery, SAMHSA breaks it down into health, home, purpose, community. And under health, basically what they're talking about is managing the symptoms of the disease, making informed, healthy choices. When you look at the home, you want to make sure that you're in a safe, stable place. Purpose, involving yourself in meaningful daily activities, keeping yourself busy in healthy activities. And then also the importance of community and that connection. And then if you look onto the right side of the screen, you'll see that in conjunction with those 4 major dimensions, they basically break out 10 guiding principles. And you can see them listed there: hope, person-driven, and so on. And I think it's interesting to go down through those. And again, we'll make that correlation to family recovery. When you look at hope, hope is really, as we talked about, it is a game changer. It is the catalyst that can often put this into motion. When we talk about being person-driven, that means that the person in recovery is making unique goals, person-centered, looking at themselves and saying, okay, so what's going to work for me? And that dovetails right into many pathways, that there isn't just one set path when it comes to family recovery that we can follow that's going to be the fix, right? There are many pathways that are going to help provide the support for us that we need to walk in our recovery journey. Holistic approach, looking at the whole of the person, the mind, body, and spirit. Having that peer support and that community connections, which dovetails into the fourth dimension there. And also relational, surrounding ourselves with people who build us up and edify us and help us succeed in the journey that we're on. And also culture is very important. We want to take into account those things that are based in our cultural values and our beliefs, and how is that going to relate to my recovery walk? And then also addressing trauma that we might have experienced, building on our strengths and respecting not only others, but ourselves. And so you can see definitely this is coming into play with those who are walking on that recovery path, who are struggling with substance use disorder, but it actually does play a role with us as family members as well. And this is where we're going to tie it all together. The relevancy to family members is this: we didn't cause it, we can't cure it, and we can't change it. You may have heard that terminology, comes a lot out of the 12-step programs, and it's certainly true. We cannot control the behaviors and attitudes of those with SUD, but we are responsible for our own behaviors and attitudes. And as we become more responsible and in tune with what it is we can change about ourselves, we can then contribute to their recovery. We can then make a positive impact on them. But ultimately, when all is said and done, at the end of the day, we're really only responsible for our own well-being. All right. And so we also need to educate ourselves on the disease. When we look at community and we talk about those 4 dimensions and those relationships that we just touched on in the previous slide, I mean, this is putting ourselves in those situations where we can be around other people who have gone through this. We can be supported by them and their experiences. We can learn from their experiences. We could learn how the disease of addiction impacted them and maybe some of the solutions that they incorporated to regain their life. But just educating ourselves on the disease of addiction, understanding that addiction itself is a disease, that substance use disorder is a disease, that it's not a moral failing. And of course, staying out of denial. When we educate and we surround ourselves with people who have gone through the same thing, we can start to come out of that place where we can go because we just don't want to recognize it. But denial and secrecy, I think, kind of goes hand in hand. We believe that that's really the glue that holds the addiction or substance use together, not just for our loved ones, but for us as well. So we want to do everything we can to stay out of denial, realizing the powerful connection we have to our loved ones. And there, as we said before, when we talked about the definition of family, whomever someone considers to be their family, those are the people that they have that closest emotional bond to. And that has more power than sometimes I think we recognize. And it's very important for us when we talk about the importance of family recovery to recognize that and to build on that strength. But as we said before, we can only be responsible for ourselves. So we really need to focus on our willingness to pursue change in ourselves first, because that's really all that we can control, and recognize that we're always at choice in doing that. So again, we'll dive into that a little bit more. So looking at family recovery as the pivot point, I don't know if you've ever tried to Google family recovery, for instance. If you do that, you're going to get 1,000 hits. And the reason for that, if you look at where those hits come from, they actually come a lot from treatment centers or places that provide treatment for our loved ones with SUD. And, you know, when you really look at that, it makes sense, because they know that in that capacity, it's very important to bring the family into this, because of the power that the family has to help them on their walk. So, you know, Stacy, I'm sure we'll talk in a little bit about, you know, the impact that the family has on their loved ones, and that you need to capitalize on that this is their support system. This is when you involve the family. Now, when they're talking about treatment centers, they're looking at more of a family therapy kind of piece. But any one of those things, any one of those hits that you Googled will come up, and you can go down and they'll give you a little schmeal about why the family is so important. Now, whether or not those programs are solid, if they're holistic, they're worth their weight, is not for today's discussion. But studies have repeatedly shown that the family does play a crucial role in a loved one's recovery walk. So how can the family contribute to change for someone with SUD? Well, as we said, family is a deep, powerful connection. So no matter what your family system looks like, a loved one, this is their strongest support. And we know that in the world of substance use disorder, we know that there are no guarantees. We know that we can do everything we can within our power, within our choices, to do what we can to make a difference in our lives that can then be transferred to our loved ones. But we know that there are no guarantees for outcomes. But in and of that, we know that there are ways of being, ways of speaking and acting that can increase the chances of getting our loved ones to decide towards recovery. And you'll see there then the next couple bullet points. How do we do that? Well, we can learn as family members to provide non-judgmental, informed love and support. And for anybody who's in the midst of this with their children, if their loved one or spouse or partner is in active use, this is very tough to get your head around, because we don't think of ourselves being in that place. We can feel frantic, we can feel crazed, and not at all feel like we can be non-judgmental, loving, so to speak, and supportive. We just might be flipping out all the time, right? But when we talk about providing non-judgmental, informed, loving support, this is where it shifts. The focus starts to shift for us as family members to where we can start to, through our understanding of the disease of addiction, look at our loved ones and say, okay, this is a disease. This is a brain disease. This is something that they are victim to, okay? And that doesn't necessarily define them. And this is where we can say, you know what, I can choose to either add to the chaos. I can either add to all of this, dysfunction, whatever you want to call it, or I can choose to do something different. I can choose to be the peace that I wish to see. I can learn to better communicate with my loved one. You know, as I mentioned earlier, it's possible that many of us just live in this state of emotional turmoil when our loved one is in the throes of substance use disorder, and just feel like the only thing that we do is emotionally respond, or we call it flooding when you look at that and that emotional response, and we tend to be reactive to what our loved ones are doing. You hear the term gaslighting and how that can kind of set us off, and we get into this game of labeling them and blaming them and all these things. And it's because, I mean, really, we feel like we're doing it out of love because we care so much for them and we just want them to stop, right? But the disease of substance use disorder, as we know, many of us know, it's not that easy. It becomes a survival. It's a matter of survival for them. And they can't just, many of them want to come out of it, and they just don't know how, or they don't think they're capable. And so we can learn to better communicate with them. And one of the things that we talk about is one of the evidence-based skills that we can learn is motivational interviewing. Also using the acronym OARS, where you're asking open-ended questions, providing positive feedback to them, giving empathy, and then summarizing back to them, which can psychologically can actually get you to use some change language. And these are skills that we can learn as family members to better communicate with our loved ones. Of course, another big one is we can help them, but we cannot enable them. And we could, again, spend an entire hour just talking about enabling and how we as family members can fall into that trap very easily. But, you know, we can learn to come alongside them and say, look, I will help you make a positive change, but I will not enable you to stay the same or to stay where you're at with this disease. Also, we can create a home conducive to sobriety. This can be a tough one for families, and I know that they talk about this from a family therapy standpoint when a loved one is in treatment, to say, look, you know, it's a good idea for you not to have, maybe you're able to drink socially, maybe you're able to have those things on hand, but we need to really do everything that we can to create a home conducive to sobriety. And that means physical aspects of our home. That means the emotional aspect of our home, which kind of lends to what some of the items are that we've already talked about, but making sure that those things are not in the home that could cause our loved one to recycle or relapse. Also, the whole idea of boundaries is another topic that we could spend an entire hour talking about. It's important for us as family members to learn how to set reasonable boundaries, ones that we can actually enforce, and know when to implement those. It's not something that you need to take lightly, and certainly isn't something you would do willy-nilly. It's something that it's a skill, and understanding the boundaries are for us as family members, not necessarily for the loved one. And so I always think of boundaries when you think back to the slide where I had about the 4 principles under SAMHSA and having a stable, safe home. When you translate that into family recovery, boundaries can play a big role in that, you know, to where you say, look, I have to establish this boundary in order for me to feel safe in my home, you know, so long as you're, you know, in active use. We had to set that boundary with our daughter because we were raising her children. Might have the decision been different if we didn't have that responsibility? Possibly, but for us, that was something that was a boundary we had to put into place, and we had to be sure that we could enforce that. It was very difficult, probably the hardest thing we've ever done, but it was something that we had to do. And so when you look at boundaries, boundaries are those things that you can put into place to help protect your well-being and your home and your finances or anything that belongs to you or is about you. And then, of course, self-care, which is a big one. We as family members can definitely fall into that trap to where we become so consumed with our loved one that we forget to take care of ourselves, even the most basic things like going to the dentist or making your doctor's appointments or taking your medication or walking every day or even just taking time for yourself. So these are all ways that we can change. And I love the picture there on the screen. Change is good. Yeah, people say, yeah, change is good. You go first, right? Because change, it might be good, but it's not easy. And some people really cannot, they have a very difficult time with it. But this is particularly important here when we're talking about family recovery, because, you know, we are the only person that we can change. As much as we want to change our loved one, we cannot do that for them, but we can change ourselves. And in doing so, get our own life back, recover, and have a better sense of well-being. And then in essence, reciprocate that to our loved one. One of my favorite quotes in regard to this is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I'm also a big fan of it is what it is. which some people hate. But this is one of those quotes that, it speaks truth, right? Simple, basic truth. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And we can let that process begin with us. And this is where I just wanted to take a minute and share a little bit about our story and tie it in to what we're talking about today. As I said earlier, our daughter has struggled with substance use disorder and is in a good place right now, and certainly is taking that one day at a time. And so are we. So it was, obviously a very rough road. We really didn't know anything. We were pretty clueless, and we still had 2 younger children at home. And then, of course, through this process, had assumed custody of our 2 grandchildren. And talk about changing dynamic of the family structure. It certainly did. And in many ways, it actually impacted, the decisions that we made or maybe had to make. And so I think sometimes it made it a little bit tougher even. But we could not have made it through to where we are today. And believe me, we haven't come full circle. We're still learning every day. We still go to support group every week. We still read everything that we can, but we needed that education. We needed to understand about the disease of addiction, and not just about the disease of addiction, but we learned everything we could about what our daughter's drug of choice was, what the impact could be on her. Admittedly at first, I think for me, and I won't speak on behalf of my husband because he's not here to defend himself, but for me personally, I think early on I tried to utilize that information to control her or to try and manipulate the situation in some way, and not in a way that was really conducive to me being in recovery. And so along that walk, that is something that we have learned to know that the only person I can change or I have the power to change is me. And I will love our daughter unconditionally. I will not enable her. And these are all great things. And it sounds like textbook sayings, I guess, in this space. But there was a lot that went into being able to do that. And for us, that took, like I said, the education. It took getting involved in peer support groups. And for us, we established, as they said earlier during the introduction, and we do a Parents of Addicted Loved One, or PALS, support group every week at our local church. And that has been a great community and a connection, a fellowship of people that we have grown together, even though we're all at different stages of our walk. And it has made a tremendous difference, not just in our lives, but in the lives of the group members. They will often share about the changes that just being part of that support group and knowing that you're not alone, and having somebody who, alongside you who's been there. The BALM has been a great support to us. And like Stacy, I'm actually able to facilitate some BALM groups as well. I'm not going to steal her thunder because I know she's got a lot of great stuff to talk to you about. But also just getting involved at the state level from an advocacy standpoint. And also, and quite honestly for us, most importantly, our faith and our faith community has had a tremendous positive impact on our walk. But I was out of bounds. I had totally become consumed with what my daughter was doing, who she was doing it with, where she was, whether or not she was, it was craziness. I can remember sitting out parked in a parking lot one night, just watching. I don't know what I was even watching for, but I was like a private investigator, and it was all for nothing, because nothing that I did made one bit of difference in that regard. It wasn't until we started, as my husband and I started to find recovery, that my daughter will actually say now that it has made a difference for her because of our approach that she felt more comfortable to come to us, and we knew that we could communicate better with her. And so we believe that it has, while it's been a very tough journey, it certainly has been one that not only helped us, but has helped her as well. So I say all of that as I dovetail into this, is it's near impossible for us as family members to make those changes and learn what we have to do to get our life back and to have the impact on our loved ones' lives if we do not have support. It is vital. It is a lifeline for us. So, these are the things that we can do. And I have on this next slide, you'll see the little toolbox. I love that little guy there. But he's putting tools in his toolbox, and that's what we need to do. We need to build that toolbox. And these are the things that we can utilize. You heard me mention a couple of them: peer support or support groups, knowing that you're not alone. PALS is one of them, as I mentioned, but there are a number of other ones. There's Smart Recovery. There are 12-step programs in terms of support groups or peer support. You can also get peer support through certified family recovery specialists who work, which is very much like a certified recovery specialist, sometimes working through recovery community RCOs in the community, or drug and alcohol commissions, or other peer support programs in the community. They serve a very, very vital role. Also, evidence-based programming. So there's a lot of evidence-based programming out there. One would be, and again, the suggestion is that you learn about this as much as possible, because these evidence-based programs are just what they sound like, that they actually do have the science behind them, that they work, right? So CRAFT is one of them. If you're not familiar with CRAFT, we know that stands for Community Reinforcement Approach and Family Therapy. And this is a behavior therapy approach to helping people make change, being aware of what the stages of change are. A lot of people don't know what Prochaska's stages of change are, and so learning about that. Motivational interviewing. In the social services world, we have learned motivational interviewing. It's a skill set that can be learned. It's not always easy to learn, but you can learn it. And it's definitely applicable when it comes to recovery. Smart Recovery is another program that is basically built around self-management and recovery training. There's also educational programs like the BALM, which is the Family Recovery Institute, and Stacy's going to talk more about that. And also, if you jump down on the bullet point there, you'll see the Life Family Recovery Coach. That dovetails in with Stacy as well, because that's what she is, and she has obtained that additional certification, and that's a great one-on-one service of support for folks. But also looking at one of the other ones that I like through the educational programs that I'll throw out there is the Invitation to Change. And the Invitation to Change program uses the CRAFT method. It incorporates motivational interviewing, and then also acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. So those are some options for people, but there's more and more of these options out there for folks. Again, it depends on what your pathway looks like and what you're wanting to incorporate. Knowing that there's clinical support. Don't be afraid to talk to your primary care physician about what it is you're going through. Don't be afraid to seek out counseling or therapy or family-based programming. Those can all be tremendous supports. Spiritual support, of course, as I mentioned, for myself, this was a very important part of my path. And those are, you can turn to your faith leaders, prayer groups. We know that there's a bigger push now from the faith-based community in this space, and it's, in my opinion, an underutilized support for sure. And but that's something we need to think about. And then the last thing that I added here is the breath. And I use the breath because that's a tool that we can take anywhere we go. If you can learn some deep breathing exercises, this is something that you can use in your walk to help stay peaceful and calm. And then the last slide would be, I know I've gone over a little bit and I apologize, the Serenity Prayer, which is the best. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's really what it's all about. It's about getting there, that we can say, you know, look, I can only change me, help me change what I can, and leave the rest up to you. And to always remember that where there's life, there's hope. So I know there's a lot of information. I apologize for I didn't realize what time it was. So I'm going to hurry up and defer to Stacy. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
Thanks, Bobbie. Thanks for all your insight and, you know, really for your message of hope, which I do think that families need to hear more of. It's a really important message for families. So if anyone has questions for Bobbie, please just put them in the Q&A feature at your convenience, and we'll get to them at the end. So our next speaker is Staci Karchner. Staci is a Be a Loving Mirror Family Recovery Life Coach through the BALM Institute. Because of Staci's own journey, she has a passion for helping families get to the BALM Family Recovery Program sooner than she got to it. So for over 4 years, Staci has been enrolling families in the year-long BALM Family Recovery Program, coaching families one-on-one, and teaching an 8-week Taste of BALM course in multiple Pennsylvania counties with a lot of success. So and I do want to mention that these courses are provided to families at no cost due to funding through county grants. So Staci, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I'll try to speed through it a little bit because I see we are short for time. I timed myself on this because I have such a passion for family recovery that and helping families that I could just talk forever. So I put a lot in here for the 15 minutes, but I'm going to try to even shorten it up. As I practiced, it took me about 13 minutes because I try to not go over. So I'll try to make it as brief as I can. So that we have a little bit of time for questions, answers, hopefully. But yes, I'm Staci Karchner. I am a BALM Family Recovery Life Coach, with BALM standing for Be a Loving Mirror. I took, it was about a little over a year training to become a family recovery life coach. And the BALM evolved around the fact that those with substance use disorder, they are human beings and they deserve love just like anybody else does. What I say I do in a nutshell is I bring families hope, peace, and calm, and help them become their loved one's best chance at recovery. And love the quote, as long as there is life, there is hope. I'm just gonna keep the slide here for a second and just say that substance use disorder touched my family. That is why I have the passion. Both of my children, I was insane. I believe that if I wasn't, I think it was my problem. I believe that if they just got their crap together, everything would be fine. Now I know that, I was part of the problem and also part of the solution, and everyone, needs treated. I was taking, behaviors personally. Unfortunately, those behaviors are part of the symptoms of the disease. And as long as somebody is using, they're going to have those symptoms such as lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating. So I was taking all the behaviors personally, didn't understand my crucial role. Many things I thought that were so loving, we're actually enabling, and I was contributing, to the addiction. So when my son was in his 7th treatment center, my daughter was in early recovery. My son relapsed, and like I said, I was insane. I was hysterical. I lived in a hypervigilant state constantly, and began, going to Al-Anon and all the family programs, and those were great. They were support and education, but they weren't enough. I was still doing the same things over and over because I wasn't changing my own patterns. So my son relapses. I call the therapist. I'm crying hysterically, and she said, "Did we sign you up for the BALM?" I said, "What is that?" She said, "Oh, I think it's going to help you tremendously. It's a year-long online program." And she signed me up for that year-long program. It's one of the biggest blessings in my life. I got a coach to work with one-on-one. I regained my peace and calm, number one. And then I learned to change my own patterns. I learned new ways of acting and being and speaking without anger and judgment. I found a new perspective. I put these things into action. And that's when things began to change. As Bobbie said, nothing changes if nothing changes. And actually, when one person changes, which was me, everything changes. And when you come from love, another person can't help but be affected. So because of this profound effect that the Be a Loving Mirror had on my life, and in turn, my children's recovery, I was like, I have to take the training to get this to families sooner than I got to it. So that is what I did. And, I enroll families in this year-long program. It's not a free program because it's not volunteers, it's professionals, but it's a very inexpensive program worth every penny. So I enroll families in that year-long program. I'll coach them, the families one-on-one through that program. And then I also teach a piece of the year-long program out into the communities. I think in 7, 8 counties. And the counties use grants to fund so that families can have this course for free. So I take a piece of the year-long BALM out into those counties. I did that. I'm doing that for over 4 years at 12 lessons. So I have such a passion to help families. And I'm just going to put to Bobbie sort of said most of this stuff. I'm just going to add something to this is, research shows when a family gets well, the loved one has a much better chance of getting and staying well. And what I tell the families is, we're not fighting the person, we're fighting the disease. We're not fighting the person. The battle seems many times to be against the person. It's the person and the loved one and the disease are separate. We're fighting the person. And so we need to rally around that person, just like we would do if they had any other type of illness. And the family is always contributing at every given moment to either the substance use disorder or recovery. And what I teach families is, what the BALM teaches family is ways to only contribute to recovery. And then we become their best chance at recovery because we're connected, right? Just a real quick slide on what the year-long BALM is. That I was given, I said, by that treatment center, and I enroll families in. It is a comprehensive curriculum-based 24/7, 1 year long program at the fingertips. In the middle of the night, you want to be doing some family recovery? It's right there. It's made up of 3 components. There's all sorts of live stuff going on all week. You get an email every Friday. You can get on to interviews with experts and family members, those in recovery, live lessons, group coaching, journaling, meditation. There's 400, if you don't get on these live calls that you might want to get on, you miss it, goes into an archive. So there you can always pull up whatever topics you want any time of day, listen to recordings, there's workbooks, there's handouts, and it's all infused with the concept of Be a Loving Mirror. And then I myself as a coach, I choose to include 8 weeks of one-on-one coaching just to fast track that family through the program and through their challenges. I'm not going to sit on this slide real long, but just last slide said it's 3 components, the BALM. I just want to show this because what stands out about the BALM is the middle one, the transformation component, is that family transforming. The information piece, the first component, which is made up of 12 lessons, that's actually the component that I teach out into the different counties. But just something about the transformation piece that was very important. And this is why I said that I needed more. And that's what the BALM gave me, because my brain was hijacked. My children's brains were hijacked to a drug, but my brain was hijacked to my children, right? Hijacked to thinking I could control, thinking I could fix. I was totally obsessed 24/7 with what the outcome was going to be. So I needed to develop new pathways in my own brain, new patterns. And that's why I needed just as much, if not more, recovery than my loved one. So that's where that transformation piece was very important. Like transform, becomes, may find these new ways. Also, in the BALM, what I tell families and what I teach in the BALM is, we say, oh, Johnny has to hit rock bottom. We say the family hits rock bottom and we intervene. Enough is enough. And we intervene and we raise that loved one's bottom, which could be death. These days, we can't really wait for Johnny to hit rock bottom, because with the fentanyl, these days it's like, when's Johnny going to get fentanyl, not if he's going to get fentanyl. So the family hits rock bottom, and we intervene before things get worse. And then just some slides here on like why the BALM. Well, too often family members get left behind or think it's like I said, I thought it was only the loved one that needed help, but it's the whole system that's need treated. So if everybody's in a minivan, the whole family, and they have an accident, everybody's injured, we don't just take the driver and treat the driver. But BALM changes the whole family member's perspective. I see that for 4 years in my classes and courses I teach. People come in with a horrible attitude and anger. And within a couple of classes, I see that perspective change. But those in BALM learn new skills and tools, which change that conflict atmosphere in the home into one of more peace, and also in their hearts. Relationships change by learning a lot of the tools that I teach, or the BALM teaches. Even if the loved one is still using, we can have a more loving relationship with them. And we're opening that loving space so that they're able to come to us, as Bobbie said, her daughter shared with her. Treatment centers, sober living, intensive outpatient, they benefit when people are in the BALM because they get more time with the client, because families aren't calling them all the time, because the BALM's taking care of that. They would get reduction in AMAs, normally enabled by families coming in there and bringing Johnny home. And then families talk about experiences. I talk about the BALM all the time in that treatment center that gave me the BALM. So there's improved treatment outcome by changing destructive behavior within the family. Couple more things. Many families don't see their own recovery as important. So as time goes by, Johnny's gung-ho, he's learning all these new things, he's growing. The family does nothing. They're just sitting and, and not getting well, staying sick. And then Johnny comes back into that same environment, toxic, dynamic, and his chances of staying sober are just diminished greatly. So the family needs just as much, if not more, recovery than the loved one. And as I said, one-on-one coaching does fast track family recovery. And just to share, these are the lessons that I teach or that are taught during the Taste of the BALM in the multiple Pennsylvania counties. These are also part of the BALM when the family member gets into the BALM program. These are actually the first thing these families learn and go through in order. So I'm not going to talk a lot about, but just say the first one that we teach families, this number one is the family plays a crucial role, right? Teach about we have 7 C's in the BALM, and leverage. A lot of families don't know the leverage tool, and it is such a powerful tool. It's a negotiation. It's using a desire your loved one has and making a negotiation, using that desire to help them do the next right thing, help them go to treatment, help them go to meetings, whatever it might be. The second lesson is change happens in stages. We learn the stages of change and motivational interviewing, as Bobbie spoke about, open-ended questions, reflective listening, how we can help motivate others to make changes. Lesson 3 is about it's important to let go without giving up or giving in, how to stop flooding. So how to stop freaking out, learning, mindfulness practices. The 4th lesson is enabling versus helping. You can be your loved one's best chance at recovery. Enabling is anything that makes it easier for someone to continue a behavior or get a drug. Keep your focus on yourself and off your loved one will help you both. Well, you keep the focus on yourself as a family member so you don't contribute to substance use disorder. The 6th lesson is your primary task is to be a loving person. How challenging sometimes when crazy behaviors are going on. Lesson 7, big one, is don't set a boundary unless you're determined to stick to it. And then lesson 8, getting support. Lesson 9, 10, and 11 is about healing relationships with spirituality, yourself, and others. And then that final lesson just puts it all together and your journey and the destination. So as I said, these are taught in the year-long program and go very deep. And then when I take them into the counties that I teach in, I just call it the taste of the BALM because it doesn't go as deep, obviously, as that year-long program. Some people who take the 8-week courses do decide to get into the year-long program, but that's up to them. So I just wanted to flash a slide here of the counties that I have taught in. Some I am actively in now. Some some have courses that are coming. Some don't have any start date again. But I've taught for, like I said, over 4 years in multiple counties. I will basically drive to any county as long as it's 2 hours or less. Otherwise, I usually will do it by Zoom. But I've had great feedback and met some wonderful, wonderful family members during my travels. So just want to show you real quick here at the end. I talked about the 7 C's of the BALM. Bobbie talked about those first 3, and these are just powerful for the family when you get in the BALM. And those are from, like the 12-step program. You didn't cause it, you didn't control it, you can't cure it because you're not that powerful. Could you have contributed to it? Absolutely, but you sure didn't cause it because you're not that powerful. We think we are. But then, yay, number 4, I was so excited. You can contribute to your loved one's recovery. There are things you can do. What's our attitude? What's our tone? What's our perspective? Boundaries, leverage, all sorts of things. And then number 5, you are connected to your loved one on a level that transcends their substance use disorder because you're connected by love. You're connected by past good times, future good times. Number 6, you can learn to communicate. A lot of that motivational interviewing skills help that. Smile, that always helps too. And then number 7, you're always at choice. Once you realize you're always at choice, big or small, you're not a victim, only a volunteer. That frees you up when you understand you're at choice. We don't have to clean up another's mess. We don't have to give the keys to the car to a using loved one, etc. So I think this is my last slide. This slide, when we talk about the BALM, the foundation of the BALM, or really a core of the BALM, is the BALM conversation. It's like a brief intervention, which are evidence-based that can have a lot of power with our struggling loved one. So that struggling loved one has to sit in the glue of denial to stay in an addictive system. So what I say is to families, nothing changes until the family begins to believe their own eyes, ears, taste, and smell, instead of the lies that the disease compels their loved one to tell. Because if Johnny tells me a lie, I say, that's not true. Johnny says, yes, it is. And then I believe it, the game goes on. So the family has to get out of that denial, out of that glue, and start sharing what they're seeing. And so I won't get into that, but it's a very powerful tool where I teach the family how to start documenting facts and then making conversations to share, to come around that loved one's blind side. And I'll skip that because I think we're running out of time. So I'll say thank you, and I'll put up my contact there.
Thanks, Stacy. I know we're a little bit over our time here, but thank you so much for your presentation and just for all the work that you're doing with to help families in Pennsylvania. And there actually was a question for you about scholarships. So whether there are scholarships for families for the BALM program.
Right now, I did get, so every now and then I get some funds. So right now through me, I do have a small amount of a scholarship available. The price, if anybody takes my course with the 8-week course, so it normally is $1,500. If after they take my course, I can put them into the year-long BALM, and that includes 4 family members for the whole year, 24/7 availability. But I do have some funds every now and then, and the BALM, I'm not sure if actually if you go through the founder, if she has any type of scholarships. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I do have some small ones every now and then.
Okay, and where can people go to find out more information about BALM?
Well, my contact was there. I'll type it in the chat, my contact. Great. And then, and I also have, I put my, I have a little website I started too. So I'll put it in chat.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So somebody asked how a person becomes a family recovery coach. So maybe you or Stacy or Bobbie could answer that quickly before we have to end our
Stacy, I'll defer to you because I am not a coach.
So I did mine through the BALM Institute, and you do the normal training you would to be a life coach. And then you do, then there's an extra 6 months in there, then you're just focusing on family recovery. So you become an actual life coach that you can coach on anything in life, right? But then there's a focus on the family recovery component. So it's through the BALM, Institute. And if you go in and ask Bev anything about it, you just Google BALM and you can communicate with Bev. Tell her Stacy sent you her way.
I'm guessing they could find out more information about maybe possibly BALM reps in their counties.
Well, it doesn't matter where we live. We sort of can do, most things anywhere, but there are BALM people spread throughout different counties. So yes, they can, but we aren't really connected to the BALM. Like I'm not connected to Bev, like the founder. So we're all on our own.
Okay. All right. Well, so we are not coming up on the hour. We're over the hour. So I do want to thank everybody for their attendance and participation in today's webinar. And just as a friendly reminder, as after you leave, you're going to be automatically redirected to a survey. So you can just take a couple of minutes to complete that survey and let us know how we did, what we did well, what we can improve on, and just thoughts in general. That would be great. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to our presenters, and take care.
Thank you.